Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. It's hard to believe that it's already day 4 of AMA Junior Camp for 2022. My name is Kyle Thede. I'm the education specialist here at the AMA headquarters, and I am really excited about today's project, both this morning's and this afternoon's guest speaker. They're really closely tied together, and you might say that they are even a little bit out of this world. Terrible pun, but I have to say it. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Today's activity is actually tied in a little bit to some really cool current events that maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't. If you haven't heard of the Mars 2020 project, that is a mission that NASA put together just in the last couple of years. It is a mission to the red planet Mars involving a couple different spacecraft. And the Mars 2020 mission launched in July of 2020, as you might imagine. It landed on Mars in February of 2021, and it includes 2 different spacecraft. There's a rover called Perseverance that drives around on the ground, but even more excitingly, there is a helicopter called Ingenuity that is actually flying around on the Martian surface. I don't know if it's flying right now, but it did make its first flight in April of 2021, and that is really cool because it's the first time that a heavier than air controlled aircraft has actually flown on another planet. So if you didn't know that that was happening, that is something that is very exciting in the world of aerospace engineering and space exploration, and what's cooler than that, right? So today we are going to be building our own model version of that Ingenuity helicopter, all right? So, which is actually going to be a little bit simpler than you might think. So we have included in the AMA Junior Camp flight pack a kit that you can use to put it together. I'm going to show you how to do that. But if you don't have an AMA Junior Camp flight pack, we made this template that we're going to be using available for free online at AMAflightschool.com and or AMAflightschool.org, excuse me. And that template is available for free to download at AMAflightschool.org/AMA-Junior-Camp. There's the URL right there on screen. You can download that PDF, you can print it out, and you can follow along with the demonstration that we're about to do right here in the studio. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So I've already opened up my day 4 envelope here, and I've got some of the materials out. So if you're printing your template off, if you don't have a flight pack, the template is going to look like this when you print it out. You should print it on an 11 by 17 sheet of paper, and I recommend using some kind of heavy cardstock or something that has a little bit more weight to it than just regular printer paper, because this is going to be the main body of your helicopter. Now, for those of you who do have flight packs, you'll find a few other things in the envelope here. We sent you some tape. We sent you a propeller that's actually going to be the rotor for that helicopter. We sent you the template already cut out. So you can see here on the printed template, there's lines, solid lines where you can cut it out. And that there's this is how it's going to look once it's all actually cut out. All right, so pretty easy to see there. And as you can see, this is printed on a little bit thicker and heavier material, so it's a little bit more durable. And then there's a few other things that we've got in our kit here. We've got some modeling clay and we've got some sandpaper, which, believe it or not, actually serve very similar purposes for what we would be using them for. We'll get to that in a little bit, though. We've also got our motor stick, a little stick of balsa wood here. And we've also got a paper clip. Don't lose the paper clip. That's not an afterthought. That's not just a little detail that we happen to toss in there. We're going to be using that for something really important as well. So let's go ahead and get started. The first order of business, if you don't have a kit or if you printed off the template like this, the first order of business is you want to cut that template out so that it matches the shape of the one that I've got here. All right, you can see that it's got these very thin strips of material and very precise angles cut out. The triangle here has very sharp corners. So you want to be very careful when you cut this out. All right. You can use scissors. If you want to use something like an X-Acto knife on a wooden surface or a surface that you don't mind scratching up underneath, you can use that. You might get a little better results. But remember that if you're using something sharp, always make sure that you're being safe. And if you need like an older sibling or a parent or an adult who you have around to handle that cutting for you, there's no problem with that. Ask for help if you need help. All right, so once we have our template, we're going to go ahead and get it assembled. So the first thing we're going to do, you can see that it has these 4 squares that are all kind of creased at least in the pre-made version. But there's also the orange lines that you can crease along on the template. And we are going to fold this along all 3 of those lines. And once we do that, we should be able to make our kind of box shape here. Now, the pre-made version that I have in my kit has got a little strip here that we can peel off, and that gives us a little sticky edge where we can stick it together. Oh, I didn't line it up great. I didn't line it up super great. So you want to make sure you do that very carefully. All right, mine's a little bit off, but that's okay. We should be able to make up for that later on. All right, so you want to stick it together so it creates that box shape. If you're using a template that you printed out yourself, you'll need to use a little strip of masking tape or clear tape or a glue stick or whatever kind of sticky material you have around that can hold pieces of paper together. All right, so now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take these triangles here that are kind of poking off the top edge and the bottom edge, and we're going to fold those over. I'm going to try to do it in a way that's easy to see on camera. We're going to fold those over so that those triangle shapes kind of form an X on the top side and the bottom side of the box. All right, so you can kind of see there, those triangles are laying flat on top of each other and creating an X shape in the middle of our box. And we're just going to do the same thing on the bottom. And as you're doing this, you'll notice that those kind of circular pieces in the middle of your X have an X shape cut into them. And we're going to use that to hold our motor stick in place. All right, now I'm going to put my motor stick in from top to bottom. And you can tell top from bottom by whether the writing or the logos on your box are facing right side up or upside down. So it really doesn't matter if you put the stick in from top to bottom or from bottom to top, but be very, very careful that you don't rip this material. All right, we want to slide the stick through those X-shaped cuts, but we don't want to push it or force it so hard that the material tears or rips or anything like that. Of course, you can always tape it back up if that happens, or if you're using a printed template that you printed off yourself, you can just print off another one if it's ripped too badly. But always best to be extra careful when you're doing something like this, because you'll need to slip it through 6 of those little X cuts here, 3 on the top and 3 on the bottom. I'm through 2 there. Working on the 3rd. There we go. All right. Now through the 3 bottoms. And it doesn't matter so much what order these are layered in either. They're all going to be flat against each other when they're wrapped around the stick. So it doesn't really matter which set of bracings is layered in top of the other 2 or anything like that. So just however makes the most sense. And again, you don't want to force anything. You want to make sure you're doing this very carefully and with a very gentle touch. All right, I've got 1 more to go. Let's see if I can finish this off without any mistakes. And there is number 6. All right. So I'm going to slide, now that the box is on the stick here, I'm going to slide it up. I'm going to slide the whole thing up so that it's a little bit closer to the top of the stick than the bottom. All right, I want it to be about 1 inch from the top, just about 1 inch or so. All right, so this is what we've got right now. And now I'm going to take my propeller that we included in your kit, and you're going to put that on top of your stick. It doesn't really matter whether it's facing one way or the other, but it should fit right onto the motor stick. And if it doesn't, you can use your sandpaper here to kind of sand down the end of the stick until it is a better fit. Now, if you don't have a Junior Camp flight pack and you didn't get one of these propellers, these are available for very cheap at almost any hobby store that you can find. Rubber-powered model airplanes use these. Rubber-powered helicopters use these. All kinds of rubber-powered model aircraft use propellers like this. So it should be very, very easy for you to find. and not too difficult to acquire. So let's go ahead and there we go. That's on there nice and good. And now I'm going to take my paper clip here. Remember, I said the paper clip was more important than you might think it is, but I'm going to unbend it here. So you see the paper clip has a large loop and a little loop. I know that's hard to see on a camera like this, but what we're going to do is we are going to unbend the paper clip so that it looks, I'm going to try to lay it on the template so it's a little bit easier to see. It might show up a little bit better, but we wanted to have the large loop and the small loop kind of pointing out from each other in a V shape. All right, that's what we want. Again, you want to be very gentle with a paper clip because it's very easy to snap these in half. We don't want that to happen. So now you're going to take one side of your paper clip and you're going to lay it flat alongside the motor stick of your helicopter. Now, what you want to have happen, make sure you do this correctly because it's very important. You want to make sure that the other end of the paper clip is sticking out on the same side of the motor stick as the hook of the propeller. You want those two things lined up with each other. You don't want the propeller to have the hook facing this way and to have the paper clip sticking out that way. All right, you don't want those opposite directions. You want them facing the same direction. So once you've made sure that they are facing the same direction and you have the one side of the paper clip nice and flat against the motor stick, we're just gonna tape it down. So I'm gonna take a little strip of masking tape. You shouldn't need very much. The less you use, the better, but make sure that it's a good and solid connection. All right. So that's what I'm going to do right here. I'm going to wrap that tape around and get it on my motor stick. And there we go. All right, now it's time to put our rubber motor on the helicopter. And we sent along, if you have a junior camp flight pack, we sent along 2 different pieces of rubber. And if you look at them very, very closely, you can see that they're different thicknesses. All right, different thicknesses. Now, if you've ever flown a rubber-powered model airplane before, you might know that using different thicknesses of rubber or using different lengths of rubber or changing it in any way can have a really unexpectedly big effect on how the aircraft flies. So which rubber band you use is up to you. I'm going to use the thicker one here. All right. So this is just a single length of rubber band. It's got to be a band. It's got to be looped together. So I'm going to tie it together, and you would tie this together just the same way that you tie your shoes for the first half. Just cross them over. I'm going to do a double knot here so that it doesn't slip or come undone. There we go. And just to make things a little bit easier on myself, I'm going to snip off some of this extra rubber here just so it's not getting in my way. All right, so now I've got my rubber band loop. All right, this is my motor. So I'm going to take the knot of that loop and I'm going to slip that under the paper clip hook. I usually prefer to have the knot down here at the hook. And then I'm going to take the rubber band and I'm going to slip it up through that box. And I'm going to hook the other end. Oh, it came undone. That can be tricky. We want to have that knot end hooked to the paper clip. And you want to have the other end of the band, of course, connected to the hook of your propeller. All right. And once you have that, we have our completed Ingenuity helicopter model. All right. Now, a couple things that make this different from the actual Mars Ingenuity helicopter. If you've ever seen video footage of it or seen a picture of it, you'll see that the Mars Ingenuity helicopter actually has 2 rotors. So that's a picture of it right there, along with a little preview. That's our guest speaker for this afternoon, Matt Keennon, who is actually an engineer who helped work on the project, the Ingenuity project. Now, the reason for 2 rotors. Why would we want 2 rotors? Well, it has to do with one of Newton's laws of motion. If you watched a junior camp project from last year, we actually had another lesson all about this, where when a rotor spins, it actually produces a force that causes the rest of the helicopter to want to spin the opposite direction. It's called torque, and it really has to do with Newton's 3rd law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So when this rotor spins, it's going to make the rest of the helicopter want to spin the other direction at the same speed, which makes the helicopter very unstable and doesn't really want to fly very well. So the Mars Ingenuity helicopter solves that problem by having two rotors spinning the opposite direction. And those two rotors cancel each other out, and it cancels out that torque force, and it allows the helicopter to remain stable. Now, our model here only has one rotor. It doesn't have a second rotor to cancel out that torque. So this box shape, not only does it help it look a little bit more like the Mars Ingenuity helicopter, but it also kind of helps with counteracting that torque. It adds a little bit of stability to the model, but it may still need some improvements after you've test flown it to make sure that it flies just as well as you actually want it to. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to wind this model up. And you just want to rotate the propeller. If you're looking at it from the top, you want to rotate the propeller clockwise. All right. And don't worry, if you start rotating it the wrong way, you'll know, because the rubber band won't be winding up. It just will keep slipping, and it won't actually get any winds in the, and you also want to be careful that it stays connected to the hooks. That one just popped right off. So like I was saying, one of the good things about rubber-powered model aircraft is that if you start winding the propeller up the wrong way, it just won't wind. The propeller will just freely spin, and it won't actually put any winds in the rotor or in the rubber. So that'll make things a little bit easier on you. But again, if you look at it from the top, you want to wind it up clockwise. And maybe it'll help if you hold the rubber more steady at the bottom here, like I'm doing with my fingers. Kind of put a little tension in the rubber band until it's wound up enough to have tension on its own. There we go. Now, as you wind it up, you'll see that there are some knots forming in the rubber. And usually a good rule of thumb, if you've never flown a model aircraft powered by a rubber band before, usually a good number of winds for a first test flight is when you have a full row of knots along the rubber. A full row of knots along the rubber. And again, I want to make sure that I point out that if you attended junior camp last year in 2021, we had a project that was very similar to this one. Actually, we had a couple projects that were centered around rubber-powered aircraft. So there's a lot of good tips and tricks that you can find in those videos. They are freely available at AMAJrCamp, on the AMAJrCamp webpage, at amaflightschool.org. Those are still freely available. In fact, we still have those kits available for purchase. So if you want to learn more about rubber-powered aircraft, rubber-powered rotorcraft even, you certainly have the ability and the resources to do that. But for right now, I've just about got a full row of knots here in my rubber band for my rotorcraft, and we'll see how this goes. Like I said, this doesn't have twin rotors, so it may not be quite as stable as a helicopter that actually would fly on Mars. But we'll give this a try here and see what we can do. All right, just a few more winds just to be sure. All right, I think we're good to try it now. All right, so I'm going to hold it from the bottom here. And when you are launching a rubber-powered model airplane or a rubber-powered model rotorcraft, you usually want to let the propeller go first, spin a couple times just on its own, and then gently push it in the direction that you want it to fly. So I have no idea what's going to happen. We'll see how this thing flies on our first test here. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, that wasn't too bad. That was pretty good. It went up in the air pretty well. It actually stayed pretty stable. And then it came back down pretty quickly. It didn't have all the winds that you would normally put in a flying machine like that. I bet if we wound that thing up a whole lot more, like maybe 2 or 3 times as many times. Thank you. My producer just gave it back to me. If we wound that up maybe 2 or 3 times more than the ones I actually put into it, it might actually fly pretty well. Now, if you didn't have such great luck with yours, if you're having trouble with getting it to fly the way you want, that's why we sent you some other materials in the flight pack. And if you didn't have a flight pack, these are pretty easy things to find. There's a sheet of sandpaper here, and there's some sticks of modeling clay. So these things serve opposite but very similar purposes. The sandpaper can be used if you need to if you need to make it more lightweight, if you think it's too heavy, or if it like flipped upside down, or if it did something off kilter, if you need to make one end of the stick lighter than the other, you can use the sandpaper and take just a little bit of the weight off the stick. Just rub it very carefully to smooth it off. And you can usually remove a good amount of weight from the motor stick that way. You can also use the clay if you have the opposite problem, if it's too lightweight, or if you want to keep the bottom of the stick pointing downward, if it wanted to flip upside down, you can use the modeling clay to add a little bit more weight to the bottom of your stick to keep it pointed the right way up. Now, keep in mind that if you add extra weight to your helicopter, that's more weight now that the rotor is having to pull up. So you may need to add more winds to your rubber if you decide to add more clay. But feel free to experiment with it. This is a huge, landing a helicopter on Mars is a huge engineering challenge, right? There are a lot of problems that go into that, a lot of problems that need to be solved. And we'll learn more about that this afternoon when we're talking with Matt Keennon, because like I said, he was one of the engineers on that project, so he knows firsthand how difficult it can be to get a helicopter to fly right on the first try, even if you're doing it in a studio on the Earth rather than a field up on Mars. Now, one other thing I want to show you before we close out for today or for this morning, I actually have another Ingenuity helicopter that was built earlier this week. And one thing that we did with this one that's a little bit different is we actually went ahead and put both rubber bands on this one. You guys were sent 2 rubber bands if you have a junior camp flight pack. This one actually has both rubber bands wound up together on its motor stick. So this one's going to have a little bit extra power. Oh, and of course, you can always slide the box itself up and down the stick as well. This stabilizing box here, structure for the helicopter, that can be slid up and down the motor stick if you think it needs to be like slid down the stick or up the stick. If you think that will have an effect on the performance, it almost certainly will. So try that out. Try adding weight. Try taking weight away with the sandpaper. Try using different rubber bands. Try using both rubber bands. Try different numbers of winds in the rubber band. And of course, if you are getting your own propeller, if you're needing to go to a hobby store and get a propeller for your rotorcraft, try different sizes of them. They come in all different shapes and sizes. And for all different shapes and sizes of model aircraft. And this one is yours to do with however you'd like, right? This is one that you are building yourself. So if you want to use a bigger or a smaller propeller just to see what happens, you can absolutely try that out. That's the way science works. That's the way engineering works. And as I mentioned earlier, Matt Keennon, who actually built the Ingenuity helicopter in real life, or at least was part of the team that did, will have all kinds of great stories and all kinds of great advice. So I'm sure if you come to that session this afternoon with questions about how your Mars helicopter worked or maybe didn't work, I'm sure he'll be able to help you answer those questions. All right, so here's my double-banded Ingenuity. We're going to try to test fly this one and see if we have any big difference in how this one flies. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right. Well, that one flew a lot higher, but it also flew a little bit less stably. It kind of wanted to go off in a different direction. But it definitely had more power, and it definitely flew higher up in the air. So if you want to try it out with 2 rubber bands, give that a shot. I recommend maybe being outside or in a room with a higher ceiling so that you don't bump into anything. But definitely feel free to give that a try. So, and you know what? If you can figure out a way to build one of these with 2 rotors, we'd love to hear from you. We would love to hear from you. We really would like to see how that works out. But of course, remember, they would need to be spinning in opposite directions. But if you manage to figure that problem out, or if you want to just show us how your Ingenuity helicopter flew, use the hashtag AMAJrCamp on social media. Make sure you get permission to go online first. But if you want to share a video or a picture of your helicopter, or just share your thoughts on how it worked or how it maybe didn't work, we'd love to hear from you. Please share those thoughts, those pictures, those videos with us. And make sure that you tune in this afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Matt Keennon is going to be here. One of the guys who built the real Mars Ingenuity helicopter, or helped to build it, has been a part of that project. It's a very, very exciting project, and it's a huge milestone in aerospace engineering. And you guys are going to get to be a part of it. And we hope to see you there. And in the meantime, happy flying.